welcome back to the Survivor PA Season 4 recap. As always, it is me, Coach Drew, joined by Julia again. And today we are also joined by the host of Survivor PA. We have Daniel. Daniel, thank you for joining us.
Of course, anytime. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and I mean, what a great episode for you to start to hop on. We merge, and for it being a merge episode, I think we got what's the word? There was a lot of strategy talk this episode. And I feel like that was what was needed based off of how the first 5 episodes went. Julie, what did you think about just going into the merge? What were your thoughts about the dynamics? We were told very early it's 6-6. Did you think that it was going to potentially stay like that? What were your thoughts?
I was ready for it to be icy. I was ready for some potentially awkward conversations, some acknowledgement that although later down the line it might be the time, we're sticking to our guns tonight. I was hoping for rocks, but I still think we got a very exciting conclusion regardless.
I was looking at the timestamp. I'm like, there's a chance because I think they go vote with like 6 minutes left. And when the vote ties, I'm like, okay, if they show him reading every single vote, then it's probably not going to be rocks. But let's say they skip over, we could get it. And I still feel like rocks could potentially happen later in the season.
Absolutely.
We'll see. Getting as a host and as a player, going into a merge where the numbers are as close as they are, or just even, what are you hoping for / what are you expecting? And also, what do you know is going on? Like, are you around all the time, or do you kind of just fuck off until challenges?
I will say I know very little. Sometimes I'll get like the Cliff Note version of what's going on right before Tribal begins. Like, I like to know the top names in contention. I don't know who has what going into a vote. So we knew that going into that vote, there were extra votes. There was like the not vote. So those are things that I'm aware of. But what am I hoping for is just players who play the game. Like, it's a cop-out, but I want the game to play out in a fun manner. And I think we did see that. I think we saw, 2 colliding forces come in. And even though it's like cagey and it's like somebody's going to have to make a move, but I don't want to be the first one to make that move. I think we got more than like what we could have asked for. Rock draws would have been fun, but also it's like if a player does go because of a rock, there's also the feeling of like that's a little icky. And we'll talk later down the road about the rock, like the potential of a rock draw, but that's where I was at during that.
And this episode felt like a great setup. We, like I said, a lot of this is the status quo for now, but we also, on the flip side, got a lot of people who seemed very genuine in saying, like, I'll do something. I don't want it to be like this. They were saying in confessional, why would you lie in confessional? So I think this was a great setup episode to learn some more about these dynamics so that we can get some killer gameplay in the next couple merge votes.
I think we saw a good amount of players out there say, I don't want it to be tribal lines, but I do understand it has to be tribal lines for this. We also saw some people who might be down the road wanting to stick to tribal. So I think there's, the balance, and I think it's going to be more interesting when the tribal lines disappear. If they disappear, like that's when the more fun gameplay comes out of it. But also Capo didn't really there's people who only went to one tribal. So
well, and you come in and you see this dynamic, and you see even Jabbar says at the beginning of the episode, I didn't want to be looked at as a flipper right right before the next phase of the game. We get and I wrote this down in my notes. Jordan's a great confessionalist. Like, I hope, if anything, I want Jordan to survive long enough so I can just continue to watch him talk, because he is a great narrator. And I feel like we got a lot of Jordan content in this episode, which scared me because I thought it was going to be him that goes. But we get a moment where Jordan is filling Tyler in on all the goings on over the last couple of rounds, and Tyler has a fun little confessional where he doesn't like anyone here, which, once again, I'm going to say it for like the 6th week in a row, seems like a person that I would love to be friends with in real life, but in a game, I couldn't deal with it, and I'm curious to see how much longer he's able to get through like that, because some of the stuff he does say in public too. It's not like he's just keeping it private to professionals, and there are a lot of people that don't like to be talked to that type of way. Julia, who are your front runners? Like, just opening part of this episode, who are your front runners, and who are you excited to see more of now that everyone is together?
Absolutely. I'll give one for each starting tribe just because it's so early on in the merge. It's difficult to see who's really going to come on top. I think when it comes to that original Lowiki tribe, I think Jordan is positioned the best. I think he has a winning storyline without being the right out front target of his group. We've heard Lydia's name thrown out before him. We've heard J-Mac. We can assume Tyler might catch some heat for things he says later down the line. So I think Jordan has a great shot. And then on the flip side, I could see Liz being a really good sleeper pick to win this season. We saw earlier that she had good connections with Ethan and Ben, formerly Sam as well. She seemed well integrated in the majority. She's made relationships with people on the wiki. I think she has a good run in her.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this last night, off air. That was like, I think Liz has a legitimate shot. I was excited to see her win this first challenge because I honestly don't think that it would put any type of big target on her back, but we'll see. Daniel, so Chipotle. The next thing I might think is Chipotle, but we'll skip through that. I question: how long does it usually take for y'all, for most of these, to set up the next challenges? Did you guys stay on schedule this day as we go into this merge?
I think relatively we were a little bit behind. I think maybe we were doing some challenges late into the night and not doing the trial. Like you saw that with the swap where the tribal happened in the morning. There's things like that where it's like, okay, it's not that we were being nice. It's like, we're just behind schedule. We need to go to sleep kind of thing. But I care more about the game ending at this specific time, which we did end the game at the time. Everything kind of works out and we work, the players don't know the schedule because the schedule changes as it goes on. We have the biggest crew this season though, and we had dedicated people for the challenges. We had somebody running the challenges, just an entire department being created around challenges this time. We had people whose only role out there was to test and set up challenges and get dream team footage, which is something we haven't had in prior seasons, was like the dream team shots. So it's something I would come in and be like, could we just move the flags a few feet down? And I think that would look cool. And then I'd walk away, come back and be like, okay, yeah, let's go. So it's from my perspective, it was a really good process, but I know the, group of people who were running that, they were doing a lot. We also had, a lot more. We had sketches of how the challenge would be set up. We had a bunch of documents and stuff. So we were well equipped going into challenge setup. And I mean, laying out PVC pipes like we did for this challenge might not be the most time-consuming setup, but we do a lot of testing. I know with this challenge in particular, the balls weren't working the way we expected them to. The weight of the ball was off and it was either too easy or too hard. So we had to make last-minute adjustments, find different balls, So there's, things on production side that we're doing that's not just lay the pools out and call it a day.
Okay. A weird segue here, but before we get to the actual challenge, I do want to bring up something that is pointed out pretty early in the episode, and it becomes a storyline the rest of the episode. J-Mac has a conversation and also gives a confessional talking about how they feel like they could be a target. They know that their name has been floated out there. They know that they're being looked at as whether it's a threat, a target, whatever. They know that, hey, there's a potential that I go home this episode. And jumping the gun after the challenge, J-Mac gives another confession where it's like, hey, I know this, so I'm just going to chill and just let these people do this, and I'm just going to fall back into the background. And we'll talk about later whether that was a good idea or not. I think it was. But endurance. We have endurance to start off our merge. Julia, what do you think about this challenge? I love endurance challenges, and that's pretty much it, unless it's like trivia. How do you think you would fare in this?
I would be terrible at this. I have notoriously shaky hands. I would not do too well, but I love watching an endurance comp. They're so interesting. And Daniel, I'm curious how you feel that Survivor proper stole your merge challenge from this season.
I'm confused. I might be lost. They
Yes.
half merge, half not merge. They have
Yes.
done it. We lifted it from them like a while ago. I do. I like the fact that we have challenges that they use on the real show.
It makes it super authentic.
I think
the challenges are a blast to watch.
I mean, and it's like every pool is a different color, and like the balls on that are the color of that pool, and there's, it's fun. I think the bigger pain here might have been the sun, like that spot, like the sun changed direction a lot. So some players would have it in their eyes for a bit, and then some players would. So we were just like, stand however you want, be wherever you want, but just know the sun will change. Everybody's gonna get screwed at some point, but I think that was the more challenging part here.
Yeah, you guys did it for about 30 minutes, right? Before you moved to on 1 foot, or was that?
Yeah, I think it was probably like I think it would have either been like 2 or 5 minutes in between each handhold. So I think 2 minutes with like 8 handholds would get you around 30. I don't know, failed math, but we got to the point where it's like, okay, you're all the way at the top. Let's switch it to the way. And then you got Emily, who is a yoga instructor. And it's like, okay, well, she's like kind of odds on favorite to win this, but
we get the Liz win, hopefully one of many. And you say that you bring up the fact that the gods are not done with everyone yet in the game.
I think Ben had, I think there was like a slight voice line that is like not audible, but like Ben is like, no church in the wild, which like the church in the wild might be gone, but we're not too out of the woods yet.
Before we get to the options laid on the table, how did you come up with the idea that you want to go this route for the season? And on top of that, was it any thought that you might not do it once the merge started, or was this always the plan to just do it however much longer you go in the merge?
You're talking about the necklace portion.
No. Oh, well, I'm talking about I'm talking about the extra thing that goes along with the necklace and the season. Well, but also just talking about the altar first, like what made you want to use that as the theme this season? And then was it always the plan to continue it through the merge?
Right.
Or did you re-on fence about it?
Oh, it was always a full season thing, and that came after right when you make the decision to name the season after the twist, you have to follow that through. If it's called Mountain of the Gods, but the Gods is only half the game, then what's the point? So it really, I mean, the whole twist came from a simple question of like, we all know people have said the Survivor gods, but there's nothing else to that. And so it's just a way to like build upon a notion that we all have some knowledge of. So any Survivor fan can see Survivor Pennsylvania Mountain of the Gods and already start having an idea of like, oh, what does that mean? Like, what do I think it means? The Gods Altars, it came more so from wanting to do the duel, having like a Redemption Island type esque arena thing where people can come in and do the small duels. And do more rewards. And it kind of built more into like this summit type journey-esque thing, but our own little take on that, where the gods are leaving as they're chosen, so nobody can go and prove your story. You're the only one who will ever know what happened. So that's kind of in a nutshell where all that came from. So yeah, always knew that the gods would be there the whole time. Always knew the altars was only a pre-merge thing because we wanted it hooked up to the duel mechanic. Duel mechanic would leave when there's no teams. And then it was the necklace was the biggest gambit, because if nobody ever chose an amulet after winning the necklace, the twist, like we could just edit it out of the show, nobody would ever know. And so giving players an option to engage or not engage with something is really trusting the process and hoping. And we got really lucky. Liz's face lit up. Liz is like, I think I'm going to choose an amulet. And it's like, best dream ever. The whole necklace came from the idea of having multiple necklaces to choose from and allowing each necklace to be a different theme and a different power. And or coming with like a scroll like a la Cook Islands. But then it's like, how can we make this simpler where it's like less props, we don't want to make 10 necklaces. Yeah. Let's just have a centerpiece that pops out and plops in. And as soon as we had a sketch of that, I knew, I was like, this is something cool. So a lot of these ideas came from like reverse engineering, like what kind of mechanic do we want? And then what steps do we take to get there?
Okay. And then I guess going off of that, how did you kind of come up with how many, the number of things they could choose from, and how, which ones would be more powerful? Did you just kind of, was it all just random, or?
Oh, I mean, it's a little bit of random, but it's also like, well, 1, 5 is a nice number, but 2, we don't want the necklace affecting every single round. We would assume sometimes somebody wouldn't take an amulet. There would be an expiration date at it, but like it's all balanced. If we're going to do something like somebody gets an extra vote, does it make sense with how many people are in the game? Because that could happen at 12, that could happen at 8. Like we don't know when it comes into play. Same thing with the altar, like the altars, like each one, and we kind of picked out the order, but it all had to make sense with any time, any choice. So the 5 amulets felt like the right number, and I'm very happy and standing by like the 5 amulets. And then what the names are matters. I mean, we had for the altars, and we had the names changed quite frequently of what these gods would be named, and we had kind of like the loose ideas for what they were. Some of them came from, okay, I would imagine a god of fate. What would fate look like? Or relationships are a big part of Survivor. What can we do with relationships? So the names were always in flux, and there was no, like, we weren't dead set on, like, death has to be an amulet up for grabs.
So Liz wins, and she picks preservation. Julie, what do you think about this? Would you have picked anything in general, or where would you have gone at this merge with the dynamics that we have here, without you really knowing what each of these things mean, but knowing that you're going to be safe no matter what? How would you have navigated this?
I think me personally, I wouldn't have taken the risk knowing that it's going to be, or looks like it's going to be, a deadlock situation, not knowing if these are all positive, if they're negative, if it's something that could hurt you and your alliance, especially when getting your way at this merge vote could pave the way for the rest of your game. It's something that I think I would have sat back on. Luckily, it worked out for Liz when it came to what she got, but I don't think I would have been bold enough to take the risk.
Do you think that if it was later in the game, you might, or like it's okay?
Definitely. I think the timing would have influenced my decision for sure.
So Liz picks preservation. We get back, and this goes back to what I alluded to earlier. J-Mac says, hey, I'm just going to kind of chill. I'm just going to do what everyone else does because I know that my name's been put out there and I don't want to put my head above water right now. Which, like I said, I think that's I would try to navigate that situation. If someone's being too vocal, let that person be the target right now because everyone already thinks that I'm like king, queen, etc. shit. I don't want, I want to pass that baton off to anyone else. And ultimately, it really doesn't matter much because J-Mac still catches half of the votes, basically half the votes both times. And then it just turns into a big, I think like a 10 to 12 minute strategy smorgasbord. Like we just get nothing but conversations with people. And I can also say I had no idea what was going to happen. At one point, we do hear, Barton or Kayla. And the Kayla thing kind of came out of left field for me because, Kayla has her moment where she brings up the donkey. And I don't know why I didn't just use context clues to figure out what she was talking about. But as she's talking, I'm like, what is she saying? And it has to be clarified. No, it's a goat. What are you thinking about Kayla right now, Julia?
I think she's hilarious. Usually I'm someone who can get slightly annoyed with players who aren't familiar with the game as much, but her personality is so magnetic, and she, for lack of better words, does not give a fuck. She seems to not care about threat level management or like her perceived threat level, anything like that. She just wants to play the game, and I love it. And
I think she's somewhat
hope you guys-
annoyed with other players not
Yes.
playing.
And I love that. I was going to say it earlier with Tyler. Tyler says everything on the outside of what I'm feeling inside, and I feel very similarly about Kayla a lot of the time.
I think she would have
thrived. When you casted Kayla, knowing that she had no idea about anything from this world, what were your expectations?
I know that whatever expectations I had were like blown out of the water with how well she handled the tribe phase of the game. She competed in 3 duels at least, and she made probably the best shelter we've seen in Pennsylvania history. And she was like in the interactions I was having at the challenges was a very standout person. As soon as the marooning happened, I walked out of the marooning and she was like one of like the 3 or 4 people that were like high on my radar. I mean, she competed in the challenge, so like of course, but definitely exceeded expectations. And being a super fan of Survivor is by no means a criteria to play these games at all. So I personally really love having the people who haven't seen the show or maybe watch it. She seems like somebody who probably watched the first like 5 or so years of Survivor because it's a very much old school game. But I think that it's not just her game that's being impacted by the decisions she's making, but everybody else has to change their perceived gameplay going into the game based on what Kayla says or does now. So, and everybody is part of that puzzle piece. So having those people is like very crucial. So I love Kayla. I mean, I love all the players, but for a new player, I feel like, I get her, and I think it's kind of going into the merge and being the complete opposite. I hope people vote me because I want to see if they think I'm annoying. Like I like that.
But she has a confession where I think she talks about how basically her adrenaline's running high because everything's being messy, everyone's being messy, and she's really enjoying that aspect. Which is, I think, earlier in the season she was not really about that. She was just like, she just wants to do the whole social thing. And I'm excited, curious, nervous, all of the words to see how she fares with this aspect of the game. We see bits and pieces of her talking to folks this episode, strategy wise, but it is primarily J Mac, Jordan, Barton, Tyler, folks like that. But I think as the herd begins to thin and Kayla survives, hopefully, that we start to see how she manages this situation. Not having at least an old school mentality about things. If she can adjust, or if she sticks to her guns and it works for her that way. She's one of the people that I'm very excited and hopeful to see as the game progresses. Her, Jordan, Jabbar, a few others. So we get to tribal, and like I said, I have no idea what's about to happen. I have a suspicion that maybe the vote is close, but like J-Mac's probably going to catch some votes. I don't really know who's going to catch votes from the other side. Julie, what were your expectations? What were your thoughts going in?
Yeah, I was fairly sure we were going to get a very close vote, like you said, either a tie right in the beginning, or I was unsure if Kiera was going to make that flip on the initial vote. I think the big question here is she seemed pretty keen early on to flip. Should she have done it right away? Was there a benefit in waiting until that second vote to finally make the switch? But I knew either way we were going to have a very close vote.
Daniel, I know you brought up earlier, you get bits and pieces about things. For this specific tribal, what did you expect to happen? And did it actually happen, or were you completely caught off guard?
I don't remember what I was expecting. It was definitely caught off guard. A lot of it came down to like who plays their extra votes is going to determine which side has that extra number. And I'm like the one with the knowledge. One or two crew people will know what the amulets do just to hold me accountable. Like we all know we're on, like some crew are in the dark, most crew are in the dark, but there's always at least two people in on the gotcha moment, so that it's not, I'm not making it up as we go. So I'm like, wait, they think Ben lost his vote, and so Pink thinks they're up. No, Liz is about to get that vote basically and cause a tie. But if Ethan or Lydia play that extra vote, now their side has the number, and it just so happened that they both did. But I'm always in the voting area, collecting the votes and tallying it and on a sheet and keeping everything. And as the votes are coming in, that's where it's like starting to hit me. What I will say would have been my dream would have been someone from Pink also flip. And so we still go to rocks regardless. Mm-hmm. And I think I remember Jabbar might have had like a hesitation. Oof. And there was like maybe like a breath or something where I'm like watching there and I'm like, please just come on, just give me that, like Kira flipped. I need a Pink to flip, because that would just be so juicy.
That's what I thought happened when we see Kira flip. I'm like, okay, there's a shot someone else flipped. And like you said, I would have guessed it would have been Jabbar in that situation. And I was itching for it. I was itching because it would have been so delicious.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that seeing Kira flip didn't ruin the suspense.
No.
Because part of that is trusting the audience and trusting the process and being like, we'll give you this, but that doesn't mean we're giving it all to you. Mm-hmm. We might be giving it all, but someone might also, it could be a twofer, but
yeah, you guys had set up enough, I feel like, throughout the episode that Jabbar felt uneasy in his position. I feel like not showing his vote, still I was like, oh, there's a shot. There's a good shot, it's happening.
And like I said, I was basically cheating, looking at timestamps, figuring out if we were going to get rocks or not. But instead we do lose Barton here, which I was, I guess, shocked by only because there was an episode a couple of weeks ago that we did get a lot of. I think Julia even pointed it out that he got a lot of content a couple weeks ago. It's like, oh man, like this is gonna be a character moving forward, and it didn't end up like that. But the content that we did get from him, specifically in that episode and in this episode, shows that he had a good idea of what was happening. So, Dan, I guess to string off this for just a second, when you're asking questions, and I feel like every host is different. Do you ever try to egg people on, or do you try to plant thoughts in people's heads, or do you just go in? I'm going to ask this question no matter what I know, what I don't know, or are you trying to like mess with people?
I don't try to necessarily mess with people. I have, the list of things to get to, whether that's somebody who is in on that information, or sometimes the person who has the idol will be asked, hey, do you know if there's an idol around? But somebody who like has nothing to do with an idol could also get that question. Like, you only know as a player if a question feels a little targeted, but it's all just a little bit of throwing darts. I will say, like, I can, like, if it got to a point where players are annoying me as somebody who put the game together, or as a viewer, or somebody who wants the game to be fun, but it seemed like it was going in a non-fun direction, that might be where it's like, all right, let's just cut the crap. Like, why are we doing like? But no, I don't deliberately go trying to like push buttons. I just want to find out whose buttons were already pushed leading up to here and figure out, okay, why were your buttons pushed? How are you feeling about that?
Okay, and so going off of that, any final thoughts on Barton the character before he goes off to the jury?
I really enjoyed Barton out there. I enjoyed Barton before we had him out there. I enjoyed him a lot while we had him out there. He talks a mile a minute, which is really fun. He also, any player who is going to be authentic in confessionals as well as camp with cameras on them is somebody that I am really appreciative of, because that's like not everybody's going to share that. And we got some really fun moment. I really liked him bad mouthing Sam coming back with the idol, and I felt like he was saying what needed to be said. So I feel like he was really fun.
He fell off that barrel. That was funny.
Fell off the barrel. I do think he said it early on in the episode of like, it's 6 versus 6. Nobody's going to want to make a move. I don't want it to be tribal lines, but I need it to stay this way until people want to make a move. I think his fault was waiting for somebody else to make that flip, and it just so happened that flip happened onto him. Had he been the one, like, you know what, Pink, like, let's do something, or let's create a new group. Had he been more proactive, something else could have happened. Unfortunately, just ended up being like wrong place, wrong time. I don't think he did anything to get voted. I think if anything, he got voted because he didn't like, you're worried about, oh, XYZ might have an idol. Let's vote someone safe.
Yeah. No, I get it, and yeah, I'm excited to see what the fallout is from everything that happened here. Julia, any final thoughts on the episode?
It was really good merge. As I mentioned earlier, I feel like we're set up some really good storylines moving forward. I think we're set up for a very fluid merge. Seems like people are willing to make moves, and I think this flip that happened at the end of this episode definitely is going to open the doors to some exciting stuff moving forward.
And Daniel, any final words you want without no spoilers? Any final words on this specific episode, or just on how the season has gone so far? Is it what you are the feedback on the season so far up to this big point? Has it been mostly positive? What are people saying?
2 people have been like really shit talking us for the past couple weeks, but I don't know. They got really upset about this, like Amy vote. I don't know. I
I
tuned
don't
them
know.
out.
They seem to know what they're talking about.
No, I mean the feedback from players, the feedback from viewers has been really good. Um, things like Julia like complimenting the challenge quality is something that I I really like. Um, and even like when we were out there, as soon as we revealed the necklace, and the players were like, "What? That's so cool!" And Jordan, I think, said that's not cool, but everybody else was like, "Wow, that's amazing!" So feedback has been fun, and I will say that stepping back, like I'm really proud of this season. The gameplay, the players, like they make the show, and we just kind of facilitate it, and they gave us what we wanted.
Shit, the production value. I've been saying that since episode one. Production value is
It's insane.
amazing.
It
Just on the episodes alone, like
You can see and you can hear them, which is great. I will say though that if the players were bad, if the gameplay was boring, like all of it kind of goes to waste. Like the cameras, the microphones, the challenges, the tribe, like all of that is, you know, doesn't matter if the players don't show up and play their best game. And I think, for the most part, we've got that, and I think that's the reason why, I will always put the blame on a good or bad season onto other people if I can. But
well, Danny, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be glad to have you back at any point throughout the season. Same goes for anyone that played on the season. It's been fun. I'm glad we've reached this point of the season. We will be back next week, same time, probably. Yeah, same time. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you next week.